Hi everyone, so Dawn of the Hunt has been out for around 1.5 weeks now, and I figured it would be an interesting topic to talk about the progression, the end game, and the solo self-hunt experience in PoE 2 right now. And I also have a lot of people that are constantly curious about the items that I'm wearing. Here of my level 96 solo self-hunt Amazon. I was like one of the highest ranked solo self-hunt players throughout the entire league so far, so level 96. You can see this here. There's only 2 97s right now, a bunch of other 96s. I was like constantly somewhere in like the top 5 to top 10. I've been playing a lot of last Epoch lately, so obviously I'm falling behind, but I'm basically right here at like probably 12 or whatever. So this is where we're at. And well, I have been blasting quite a lot, of course. So I've also completed, for example, the entire Atlas tree. So we have all the points. We have all the points in all of the other league mechanics as well. I have actually completed difficulty 4 of all of these things as well. I've killed all the bosses on T4, for example. And yeah, the only thing missing is like Arbiter. I just couldn't really find the last citadel that I needed. Actually, I did, but I got DC'd on the stone citadel, so that was unlucky. But yeah, anyway, this has been going pretty well, and this was done with my lightning spear slash like just Javazon. So it just started as an explosive spear Stormlands build, and then it evolved into a lightning spear combo build basically together with those other things, a bunch of spear field. It was a very fun build. I actually have multiple video guides on that. I have a max roll planner you can go check out. I'll link that down in the description if you want to follow it. This has been serving me pretty well. Pretty solid setup for completing everything in the game. But let's talk about the gear itself a little bit and how to get there. So I'm just going to show you off the items that I'm currently wearing. Here's my Tangled Tongue. This is a unique spear for level 26. You can actually find this in Act 2, but it turns out this is like a pretty crazy endgame weapon. The reason for that is this Fork's critical hit effect, which is a bit complicated to explain, but TLDR, you get a lot of crits and you can double crit. And that makes it pretty powerful, especially if you stack a bit of like flat damage on rings like this or on the glove, for example. So this is what's going on there. Before that, I had this weapon here, which I actually found somewhere in like a tier 13 map or something. So this was literally day 1. And I have been trying ever since to replace it until like, I don't know, a few days ago. Someone suggested for me to try Tangled Tongue, and it actually turned out that Tangled Tongue was just the better weapon, like at least surpassing my existing weapon, which was already kind of solid, but obviously this can still be like doubled or something in terms of power. And I think a good rare spear will beat Tangled Tongue here. It depends a bit on the exact setup of the tree and the crit and so on, but overall, yeah, it's pretty high-end, this weapon turns out. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised to see a nerf here in the future because it just kind of outclasses a lot of the other spears. But yeah, in terms of like solo self-found, I got extremely lucky with this thing here, getting this like so early as I did, but then I just could not improve it no matter what I tried. And you see here, for example, I have the like my Reforge tab, my Recombinator tab, and I also had like, the Toothpick tab where I have like all of these guys saved. So there's like, for example, big flat damage fist here. And then we could usually combine this with like a big, percent fist somewhere or like a big accuracy roll. And you put it into the Recombinator. Well, it turns out that none of my Recombinator attempts was ever successful, basically. Maybe 1 or 2, but then, I started exalting the items and they just turned out trash anyway. But this is basically the only hope you have right now in SSF. And it's extremely miserable, to be honest. It's just like such low chances to really get it. And not only that, but you also lose the original item when the recombination fails. So not only do you not get the upgrade that you're hoping for, but you also lose the chance to maybe, make something out of the previous ones with like, Chaos Orbs or something like that. Sometimes you don't want to risk this item that could go into the Recombinator by using Chaos Orbs, because that Chaos Orb could remove the stat I want to recombine. So it kind of like opens up a little bit of crafting potential, but most of the time it seems like it's just like the odds are too much against you. Well, long story short, I never improved this spear no matter how much I tried. I actually looked for every single spear from like 6 different base types, actually. You can see this here. Like I have like, these massive spears, stalking spears, sea glass spears, orichalcum spears, pronged spears, everything basically. There's so many spears dropping, like per map there's probably like at least a dozen, and I craft on every single one of them, and I still did not manage to improve this spear over at least the last 100 hours or something like that. So it's kind of wild how that goes, and yeah, this is just kind of like what you can expect when you play solo self-hunt. Well, let's talk about the other gear here. We have a helm, nothing really spectacular. I was trying to go for rarity throughout the entire league after learning in League 1 basically that at launch how good is rarity. I realized we should go for a little bit, and I actually stayed true to that throughout the entire gameplay. So I always try to keep my rarity at around at least 70 plus. Usually I was hovering around 80, 90, 100. And I have an item like this here where you can have rarity either as a prefix or suffix. It's kind of a good target to have some. I think I also had some here on the ring and on this ring and on the glove. So you see here I had a decent amount of rarity actually. Besides that, basically since it's an evasion build, I just try to stack as much life as possible to prevent one-shots. Evasion builds have it by far the worst, I guess, right now. At least like an SSF, it seems like you just don't get to like the evasion values where you can run acrobatics, for example, which is like a pretty powerful keystone here. It allows you to evade everything, including AoE attacks. But this is just like no go basically. Like I have way too little evasion, despite running no other defensive stats. So I have no armor, I have no energy shield basically. I just have a tiny bit from the shield there. It's just like 2.7k life and some evasion, which is like with wind tensor up, not even 9k. So at that point you have no chance to go acrobatics. And even with like a helm like this that has a good amount of extra evasion rating and a full evasion chest, you just don't get there. So it's basically all about just like stacking enough life and hoping for the best. I originally intended this build to go energy shield evasion hybrid, which is something I've done, for example, last league with Series Disdain on my Ranger, and I ended up with something like 2k life, 3k ES, and that was actually pretty nice. So if you reach like 4 or 5k EHP, then things are pretty chill. But at 2.7k, and this is a number that many people think is already pretty high, it is not comfortable, and there's basically almost no way to go further than that unless you build into energy shield, which I just failed completely. I could not do it. I tried like the entire league so far to actually pick up items that have energy shield and evasion bases and try to craft on them, and I do have a few things kind of saved that might be useful or something like that. But most of the time, you just end up, maybe not having enough ES or not having enough life. And, we have like some examples like this here where, okay, this thing has like decent evasion, decent ES, but then it only comes with 91 life. And then even if I go for this item, I also have to start replacing all of my other gear to also get more ES. So I have to replace my gloves because right now they're pure evasion. They should also have some ES. I have a bit of ES here, but it's very hard to actually build enough of this, especially energy shield when you go hybrid. And not only that, then I would also have to like repath my entire tree, which I originally had planned. I was here in the monk area and I picked up a lot of these like ES, evasion, hybrid nodes. There's like really good clusters everywhere, but then we have to like completely change the setup. And it turns out for me, this was just so hopeless. I just went with like a full evasion build and just accepted my fate that I just have 2.7k life. So this basically made life the number one priority on every single piece. And we have that here, for example. So just life rolls here on the rings where you can get them. Here on the glove, I unfortunately had a very small one. The boots are okay. And here the shield is pretty big. So shield is also something I've really invested into. You might be wondering why I'm not running a buckler. Well, I'm not doing the parry stuff. I don't actually use frenzy charges at all on this build. So shield is just superior to a buckler in the sense that it has way more block. Bucklers have way lower block chance, but they do have evasion, which would build a little more into the evade strat here basically. So this would be a bit of like an offset here, but I just went with real shields. In the end, it didn't really matter, but it is also something I really invested into. As you can see here, I had many of those shields that I recombinated until I eventually got something that had good block, good life, and then something useful basically. And this is what I ended up with. It's kind of interesting to see that some of these items were actually gathered so long ago, like over a week ago from now. Like this was like day 2 or so maybe. You see this is an item level 78. Just like the spear I showed you earlier was like item level 77, so there's not even tier 15 maps. And I was farming tier 15 maps like as long as I remember basically this league. And sometimes these items just drop, and this was, for example, a very lucky one. It just started getting really good results once I started adding more mods. This was just like transmute, augment, regal, and then boom, 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 boom. Everything was just really good. And I think the last stat I added was the stun threshold, which is not really something you're looking for as like a life-based build, but it is better than nothing, I guess. But they had like this insane amount of chaos, whereas chaos in general is like another topic here that is like really hard to solve in Soul Self-Found. This is also why I, for example, appreciate Shaula Monk a lot. I played that last league, and it was making this so easy. But up to this point, I still actually did not manage to really cap my chaos res. I mean, I could have added like a soul core to maybe get to like 71. I have like live runes here, for example, just to try to boost this a bit further. But I realized in the end, I'm probably better off just kind of going for more life anyway. So it is a struggle, especially the chaos res in Soul Self-Found. Yeah, it's just not really enough options to try to get chaos res. Like, we do have some of these essences, and you can force chaos res on items, but essence crafting is just like terrible in this game. Like, out of all this time, I think I didn't really use any of them. I didn't really use many of these essences in general. So these are all the essences I've gathered, and I have like 10 essences of ruin. Maybe I use like a handful of them. So even if I use them all on like, you know, a base, then, you know, more often than not, I will end up with some very low tier, like, you know, 7 chaos res or 9 chaos res or something, and then maybe 1 or 2 of them will actually end up being like a good chaos roll, and then I still have to get 5 more mods on the item after that. So you see that with just like all the crafting that we have available, we don't really have the options to really get anywhere besides just like fully, you know, casino style RNG those items. That's just how it works. The extent of target crafting right now is just like really low in this game. So even with the greater essences, you can then, you know, make like a 2-mod item into a 3-mod item with a guaranteed stat that you want. But even then, you know, this stat might not turn out to be a high tier roll, and then the item is just trash anyway. So it has kind of the same problem. I've never gotten a greater essence of chaos, for example, and in most of the other greater essences, I've actually never used any of them. So these are all the greater essences I've gathered, and this is it. This includes like the unique maps, and I was even spec'd on the Atlas as well into the entire, you know, essence and wisp tree here, until like a few days ago when I just like decided to like throw this away because it was completely useless. And I gathered 1 essence of Hysteria, 1 corrupted essence. I was actually kind of wondering like what they do. I wanted to find them, and I was thinking maybe I'm gonna craft some funny stuff with them, but it's the only one I've gotten the entire league as well, and I corrupted every single greater essence I found, including the boss maps. So when we're looking at all of this together, it just turns out that, you know, these like kind of target crafting mechanisms that we have, which are usually kind of like the start of an item, you know, it's not like we use these things to finish an item. They're just so weak and unattuned, and extremely like unregular drops as well. Like, I would need at least 10 times more of this stuff to really have a chance to, you know, maybe make 1 or 2 items after like 100 hours that actually have this mod that I want, plus another like 4 or 5 good mods that I want. Because there's, after that, you know, you use the essences, you get your chaos res, okay, and then it's just like all up to the RNG again after that anyway. So either way, what it means is that in SSF, you basically just like transmute augment crafting all day long. So basically, as I go through the maps, I just like pick up stuff from the ground, I identify, I throw it out, I identify, I throw it out, I identify and throw it out. And then sometimes I get like these white item bases, and then I use transmute, ding, 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 ding. And then I see if something gets something good. Most of the time not, I throw them out. Sometimes I do an augment, and so on. So this is kind of how that works. And basically per map, I would like pick up, you know, something like 5 shields and like, you know, 7 belts and like, you know, 3 rings and, you know, like 10 spears, and I would do exactly that while I'm kind of like running. So with WSD, at least you can kind of like run and do the thing and, you know, keep going, and then like this I kind of clear while doing the crafting. But it is pretty tedious, I gotta say. I do appreciate that there is like ground loot that is actually good, and we actually have realistic chance of finding stuff. But I think in general, the ground loot is way too plentiful and way too bad. And I would really appreciate if we just had like way less loot, but, you know, way more of these like, you know, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 rares, for example. Or if there was like some other way to maybe use like an item base and reuse it and re-roll it, you know, similar to how we have Chaos Orbs in PoE 1. I think that Chaos Orb spamming as an example, or like similar crafting methods on PoE 1, are not necessarily all that bad. The problem is just that in PoE 1 we get flooded with these kind of crafting options, and you just kind of stand in a hideout, you know, crafting, spamming over and over and over and over. But in PoE 2 we get way less currency, and that actually makes it so that it's not so tedious and repetitive. Like, I really wouldn't mind if I can just like take my 50 Chaos Orbs and just roll my item a little bit. And, you know, these Chaos Orbs, they are accumulate over dozens of hours. You know, it's not like in PoE 1 where you get this in like an hour or something like that. So, you know, the time investment to get these crafting materials is so much larger in PoE 2. And that makes it a good thing, not a bad thing in my book. But I think the options are just way too weak compared to what they should be in order to give us a realistic chance to actually get our gear. And that brings me to another point. Looking at these items here, I'm just going to show off some more of this stuff. You see, nothing of this is like really any kind of like high-end gear. Like some of them actually have 6 stats that I want. So here's an example. We have cold, lightning, life, rarity, double res. Pretty decent ring, but nothing here has like spectacularly high tiers, right? It is the right stats, but everything is kind of meh. So not even like the life roll or something is like a good value. And you know, kind of similar story here. And sometimes you end up with something like int that doesn't really do anything. You know, it's just like a bit of more mana. Okay, you know, there's like this kind of stuff. And I feel like there's like way too little options to actually get to the stuff that you want, and you just hit like a brick wall of RNG at some point, where especially trying to go from like a 5 mod item to a 6 mod item is like impossible. One example is here those boots as well. You see here I've reduced chill duration, which is obviously something you don't want. I would like to have dexterity or another S here, or maybe even rarity or something on this pair of boots as a last suffix. But this is just what it is, and you just can't really get rid of this stuff, no matter what you try. I've picked up, you know, hundreds of boots. I've picked up, you know, thousands of chest pieces. I don't know, like every single one. You pick up all of them, even if they're not the right base. You know, as long as they have like, you know, the evasion mod on it and some dex requirement, I would pick this item up. This includes all of the armor pieces. This includes all of the rings besides iron rings and lazuli rings, for example, or pearl rings. So, you know, this is basically what I got from everything. And not just that, I also did a ton of reforging. So there's 3-to-1 here that we can do. At some point I stopped it because it was just like so much time investment. But basically I would like fill up like half this quad tab here with rings, for example. And then I would go here and, you know, first of all, I check them all out. So I see if I have to transmute them. I see if I can augment them. And then I see like which ones are worth regaling. You know, like something like this, obviously I would not regal, so this goes away, and this is also bad, and this is bad. But sometimes there is one that has 2 good mods, and then I would regal it, and then it would turn out bad anyway. And then we put them here, right? Then we direct a 3-to-1. And like this, you basically increase the effective like number of drops by 50%, which is pretty good, but it's also extremely slow and tedious and cumbersome. And just not really a fun experience to try to craft items this way. So it effectively just really slows you down in terms of the progression through the endgame itself and leveling up and so on. So I've done this for a while when I was kind of like desperate for an upgrade, and then I just kind of stopped it, even though it remains kind of the meta strategy. So if you want to get your gear the fastest, then this is actually what you have to do. And not just with the rings, but with every single piece that you're wearing, unless it's like a unique. Uniques, you can't do that. But, you know, for, you know, everything, like, you know, my gloves can be improved, my rings can be improved, my chest can be improved, and not just a little bit, but most of the time a lot still. You know, even after those 120 hours I put into my character right now, farming, you know, tier 50 maps like it's nothing. Like I complete it in like a minute or 2 most of the time. You know, I am really fast. You know, as I mentioned, I have gathered, you know, even like the entirety of the Simulacrum tree, for example. So I've been grinding. And yeah, this is basically what you end up with. Personally, I do enjoy playing SSF a lot. In fact, I've not played anything else yet in Path of Exile 2 in my 800 something hours or something that I have now. I've played exclusively solo self-hunt, mostly hardcore. This was a softcore character, so I was even faster and even more efficient than usual. Well, as I mentioned, while I have pretty solid stuff, it just turns out to be that, you know, you kind of like keep progressing a character, but you never get anywhere. And at some point, it just feels so hopeless that for the last few days, I just kind of like pretty much stopped picking up bases to craft them. I was just kind of like blasting, trying to, you know, have fun, trying to kill some of those bosses and get my last few Atlas points and so on. But it just felt like I would not really get anywhere anymore, even like with trying. And then the only other next step that comes after this is using those omens. And I have been farming a lot of ritual. Ritual was actually the first like league mechanic that I really invested into, and that netted me a whole 2 crafting omens after those 120 hours. So I got those 2, both the same actually, the prefix Chaos Orb Removal, Sinistral Erasure. So these are very potent crafting methods. However, they're extremely rare and in Trade League extremely expensive as well, because they actually allow you to potentially make mirror tier items, but only if you use like dozens or hundreds of them on a single piece, because you have to like, you know, keep rerolling this. You have to like, you know, fix all of your suffixes, for example, and you have like an item has like 3 really good suffixes, like a, you know, triple rest boots or something. And then you use this thing to try to fix the prefixes, or vice versa, depending on the item, depending on what you're going for exactly. And these things are like really, really high-end crafting that most people will never touch, including myself. I've still not used those because, well, even if I do, I have 2 shots to maybe not break the item immediately. Basically, this is what it does with those omens here. And well, okay, I can farm more rituals, and like every, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 hours of that, I might get one of these omens. And then, you know, after another 3 weeks, I might have like, you know, a dozen or something of them. And then I can maybe have kind of a chance to craft one item and maybe get more lucky than that. So it's, you know, there's like nothing really that allows me to progress right now. I feel like there's like this, you know, like early game gear, and then, you know, you get to like pretty solid stuff like this, like the 5 mod items with good rolls, or the 6 mod items with bad rolls like this. And then you just hit this brick wall of RNG, because getting any kind of upgrade from that point is just like, you know, 20 times harder than it was previously, and you just never get anywhere. So this is like a huge problem here, and I think that PoE 2 really needs to introduce a lot more like, you know, mid-range crafting, basically. We have like this very high-end stuff, and we have like the very low-end stuff, like, you know, the essences and whatnot, which again has its troubles and is like way too rare to really use it and stuff, and also it's like too tedious. You always have to find a new base, for example. It is just not really that good, I guess. And most of the time I kind of just ignore the essences. Yeah, and in the middle, there's just nothing, you know, you just don't really get anywhere. So as a solo self-farm player, I do have to say it is a bit disheartening to see like how hard of a wall you hit very soon. You know, as I said, you know, some of my items are still, you know, like upgradable, like my spear. It can probably be, you know, ×2 the damage or something like that, the, you know, spear I had earlier. And this is an item I found on day 1, you know, and now I'm like 100 hours later, and I have not gotten close to upgrading it. So this is just how that goes. So of course, if I decided to level my character further, like I'm 96 now, and then getting to 97 would be something like maybe 10 hours from here, and then getting to 98, maybe like 15 hours from there, and then getting to like 99, maybe like 30 hours from there, and then getting to 100, probably like 100 hours from there, something like that. And this means we can like easily invest like, you know, twice the playtime that we currently have, or a little bit more, and, you know, still level up. And there would obviously be items that we find on the way. But the thing is that these items are going to be so rare and so far, you know, in between, basically, and that it just doesn't really feel fun to try to progress a character anymore. And this is kind of like, you know, where the progression ends realistically for basically most people, if they even get to this point. But even for someone like me who really likes to grind it out, I feel like I've invested a lot of hours in this character, and it just can't really go anywhere anymore. One thing you can at least realistically farm are like these boss uniques. So I think this is a big improvement here that we have seen in Dawn of the Hunt. So not everything is like super doom and gloom. For example, we now get access to the you know, various pinnacle encounters a lot more. So if there are some items that you can use, for example, I have an ingenuity here that is a pretty good item actually, especially on a build that relies on stacking a bunch of flat damage on the rings for this kind of weapon. This is a very strong good and good item here. And I replaced my belt here. So this is my previous belt, just as another example of one of these kind of like meh items. You know, it does have 5 out of 5, you know, the stats I want. You know, the last prefix doesn't matter, so there can be armor or thorns or some flask mod, that doesn't really matter. So if you just want like the life, and then usually triple res or like a strength roll. But even that is so hard to get because there's so many like, you know, trashy filler suffixes that no one really cares about. And it just makes it so hard to get these belts. And you see here, this is not even a good life roll. These are certainly not good resistance rolls. You know, everything is just really underwhelming. But this was my belt up until, you know, I don't know, 2 or 3 days ago when I found ingenuity finally. And then I replaced it. And you see here, there's actually also item level 72. This was like found in a tier 10 map or something like that. Or maybe even lower than that. So this was also like day 1. And again, another thing where I was really trying hard to improve it. I have like my Recombinator tab here. I have tons of belts. I've been basically all of my you know, Tushen artifacts I put into recombinating belts. I've done this like dozens of times, and most of the time just get deleted. Or if they don't, then I just like don't get good mods on it. And again, we can't really make even like these like mid-range items. Like this is an item that is like easily surpassed, you know, in every regard, and it just couldn't do it. So yeah, I don't really want to like sound like I'm whining or something like that. It's just more like this video is supposed to kind of show it off, especially to maybe players that don't play SSF, like how much of a struggle it really is basically. and maybe also to GG, giving some feedback about the state of the game when it comes to Soul Self-Found. I think it's miserable, I gotta say. So while I really like the idea and the concept, and I really don't want to trade most of the time, I do enjoy SSF as the experience. Like, it just doesn't really offer like anything for the players to feel good about themselves when they really grind it out. So there's just like something missing here. I feel like in the middle between like the early game gear and the really high end stuff. I don't mind that I can't make mirror tier items, but I would like to get at least, 5 good mods on an item on like this here. Or I would like to get at least 6 of the right mods on an item like this here. And, these kind of things. I would like some way of progressing my gear where I feel like I actually get somewhere to like a really good level, to like, I don't have to feel bad about this random 12 fire res here that overcaps me anyway because I have too much fire res, that I can't get rid of. There needs to be something more that is like somewhere in between these high-end omen crafting things and, just YOLOing with transmutes, basically. Of course, I've already been showing off the items that I'm actually using in this moment. There is some more stuff that I found on the way that I made. So especially if I were to play more builds now, I actually do have some other stuff like kind of saved up with like pretty decent rolls. I have like, chest piece here with like 515 ES, slammable still and so on. So there's stuff like that that I found on the way. Got like, some, like a crossbow like this here with like Giga Fizz. And if I manage to get like a flat fizz on this or to recombine it, it'll be insane if I want to make another build. So there is some stuff like that that I find on the way. But again, this doesn't really help me here when I try to actually progress my own character. So it is a bit of a struggle. And of course, like uniques, I mean, I have a bunch of good stuff here that I found. I have like these Tangle Tongues, I have these Lycosidae, I have like some other stuff like that basically. But yeah, still some of the big stuff is kind of missing. I don't have Dream Fragments, I don't have Astramentus. Like, of course, I don't really expect these things after just like 100 hours of grinding. And these are things where I'm fine that they are reserved for Trade League, for example. But I also feel like there's like a bunch of items that are just so hard to get that you can't really expect them in SSF, which is also a bit of a bummer, especially if they're kind of build defining items. But yeah, obviously I could also try a little bit more with like, chancing. I do have 33 chance also right now. I used maybe half of those that I found. So I maybe had like 50, 60, something like that in total. I've been using some on, stellar amulets and so on, just for, trying to get an Astramentus, for example. Overall, I didn't really want to like chance anything. So that was fine. But yeah, it is also kind of like a struggle to actually target farm certain uniques in SSF as well. So this didn't really bother me on this build. This was like a full rare item build. But on other builds, that might matter a little bit more. In any case, that's about it here for my video. I wanted to show off what this looks like. So roughly 120 hours of SSF. That's like one of the top geared characters in Solo Self-Found League currently, I imagine. Since I'm like one of the highest level as well, and I've been grinding like hell, trying to get this gear, trying to, complete everything, and this is what you can expect. So let me know what your thoughts are, let me know your ideas, or, maybe we'll see what GG will do basically in the future. But I do hope that, especially in like future league updates, there's going to be more of a crafting focus. I do appreciate the effort in like, trying to bring the recombinators, for example. But then again, the recombinators right now also crowd out, the actual expedition crafting, which does need its own updates as well. But, there's like this weird overlap in, spending the same resource on 2 very different things. And I would actually like to do more expedition crafting, but I can't because I have to use all my stuff for recombinators, which doesn't give me anything anyway. So, there's like this kind of like a weird like conflict, for example, and maybe in the future they're gonna put the recombinator on some other league mechanic, for example. So this might just be like a temporary solution, and then maybe we're gonna get more stuff like that. But I think we desperately need upgrades. And from what I hear in trade leagues, for example, it doesn't seem like most people actually ever craft their own items at all. So, not only is it like tedious to try to do this, but also it doesn't seem like this is actually even the strat. And that is also a bit sad to hear, I gotta say, because I feel like this is such an integral part of like an RPG experience, trying to progress your character, trying to make your gear. And, especially in Period 1 as well, when you look back at that, or last Epoch right now, the crafting systems are so much more advanced. Like, it's actually like a ridiculous gap, to the point where I can even say that D4 has better crafting than Path of Exile 2 right now, which is kind of a joke, but also not. So this is kind of where we're at. And yeah, I think something needs to happen there, and I really hope that this is not just after the end of the early access, you know. So the early access, the way it's going, I guess will go at least until the end of the year. I do expect actually 2026. And if we then somewhere, let's say like spring onwards or something, like a year from now in 2026, start getting the first real league updates post early access that probably focus on endgame and crafting realistically, I think that it's just way too late. I think we need at least something until then to make this whole process more smooth and, you know, something to kind of get us there in the first place. But yeah, these are my 2 cents. Let me know what you think. And other than that, I will be blasting a lot of last Epoch now anyway. So this was kind of like my final, like, you know, character progression update, I guess, for now. If you want to see more about this build, I do have a maximum guide, a video guide. You can go check those out. I will come back to Path of Exile 2 later in the league, probably in May sometime, to make more characters, probably hardcore as well. I do have some plans there later on, but for now it's, yeah, last Epoch time, so early log in, guys. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you guys next time.